In the previous tutorial on RStudio workflow, we had a look at setting up project files, how to structure your project directory or folder, and we also started to have a look at markdown files. Now in this tutorial we're going to cover a kind of a fundamental concept in R, which is installing and loading packages. And we're also going to look at one package in particular called the here package, which can help us to access files. So in the tutorial on workflow, we talked about using relative paths, and if that confuses you, then this tutorial is going to kind of look at a different option for accessing files and saving files. But to begin with, we're going to talk about packages. R comes with quite a bit of functionality already built into it, but where it really comes into its own is that you can install what are known as packages. So these are kind of extra kind of add-ons which give you more functionality than you get from the base software alone. This might seem like a strange concept, but it's not really that unusual. There are lots of other more familiar pieces of software where you might have add-ins or extensions. So web browsers quite often have extensions that you can load in, and a piece of software like Microsoft Excel has add-ins which enable you to do extra things. So it's a bit similar to that. Now, packages, because R is open source, packages are created by pretty much anyone who's learnt to write a package. So statisticians across the world will create packages to do whizzy stats things, and you can kind of load or install those packages into R, and then you can do those whizzy stats things too. So over the course of using R, you will become very familiar with the idea of installing packages and then loading them into your system. So this diagram on the screen at the moment really illustrates this. So you have a computer with R on it, and around the world there are people with humongously big brains who are writing complex packages to do complex statistical things. And once they've written these and they've passed a number of tests, then they upload them into something known as the CRAN. There are actually some other places that you can upload them to as well, but most of the packages that you use you'll get from this thing known as the CRAN, which sounds a bit sci-fi, but it's probably not as exciting as, you know, like the Borg or something like that. So they upload these packages, and then they're sitting in the CRAN waiting for unsuspecting students around the world and statisticians around the world and data scientists around the world to load them into R. So the CRAN is kind of a repository of packages, and when you want to do something that you can't do using base R, what you would do is install the appropriate package into your system, and then you have that on your system until such time as you update your version of R. So that's the basic idea. People upload packages to the CRAN, and then users, people like me and you, then install these packages so that we can benefit from their wonderment. So there's a distinction between two things here. One is installing a package and the other is loading a package. So let's look at that distinction. Installing a package is the first thing you need to do. And what this does is it puts it on your system. So it puts it on your computer. So the first thing you need to do to use a package is install it into R's library or repository of packages on your computer. So installing a package puts it on your computer so that you can use it. So what that means is if you use R on different computers, you will have to install the package on each of the computers that you use. However, once you've installed it, it's there and it will stay there until such time that you reinstall R or update R. So if you update R at any point, you will need to reinstall the packages to use them. If you never update R, then you don't. And the way that we install packages is we use a function called install.packages, and then within that, within some kind of straight quotes, you put the name of the package. We'll have a look at doing this in a minute. So it's just one simple command, we execute it, you have to be connected to the internet, and some stuff will happen, and then you have the package on your system. Now, a very important point here is you should always, other things being equal, you should install packages from the console or the command line. Don't put install package commands in your markdown file. The reason being that when you process your markdown file to make it into a pretty document, it will execute that command. So you'll be installing the package every time you process your markdown file, and that's not what you want to do. So other things being equal, install packages from the console. So that's installing packages, it puts it on your system. The next thing to know about is loading packages. So it's all very well having the package on your system, stored on your computer, but to use the package in a particular RStudio session, we have to load it. So we have to tell RStudio, I want to use this package. And the way we do that is with a command known as library. So all we do is type library and then in brackets put the name of the package that we want to use. Now, library commands should be in your markdown file. So generally I advise people, this is what I do, at the start of your markdown document you have a code chunk and you put all your library commands in. So you put library commands for all the packages that you want to use. I do it in alphabetical order as well because that helps me to see in the document what packages I'm using. So just to recap, you install the package from CRAN onto your computer, and then within RStudio, when you want to use the package, you have to use the library command to load it. Okay, so let's have a look at installing a couple of packages. If you've followed the workflow tutorial, then and you're a student at Sussex, you should hopefully already have a project that we set up from that. And here I suggest for students at Sussex to save it onto their Sussex OneDrive, but wherever you have it saved, if you're following these tutorials, go to that folder, navigate to, in that tutorial we put it in a project folder called My First Project. So go into there and you should find that there's an proj file in there, so your project file. So double click on that and that will open RStudio and put you into your project. If you don't see your markdown file in this window, then all you have to do is in the files pane is navigate to it. So you might, for example, see this kind of thing when you open up your project folder, your project file, in which case go into RDocs and just click on My First Markdown, which will open it. So we've got a markdown document on the left, we've got our console on the right. This is how it should look if you followed all the tutorials so far. So let's have a go at installing a package. So to install a package, remember we do this in the console, and we want the command install.packages. So type that in, and then within the brackets we need some straight quotes, and then we want the name of the package that we're going to install. A package we're going to use a lot is the tidyverse package. So let's install that. So tidyverse, T-I-D-Y-V-E-R-S-E. And there you have it. That's the command you need, and hit return. And if you're connected to the internet, a load of gubbins will come up that you don't need to worry about. Probably looks fairly horrifying, but that's just telling you it's been installed. Hopefully you don't get an error message. Let's try doing another one. So install packages. And actually a little feature of RStudio is as you start typing things, it tries to guess what you're typing, and you can actually use this list to either click on the thing you want and it will complete it for you, or if you're typing away and it comes up with, if the highlighted option it has is what you want, you can just hit return and it will finish it for you, so that can save you some time. Straight quotes again, and we're going to install the package called here, H-E-R-E. So again, we've got command here, install packages here, hit return, and it will install them. So these packages are now on our computer, but they're not active in our Markdown document. So moving over to the right here, we've got from our previous tutorial, we've got a Markdown document set up, and in this first code chunk, which is actually, by default you'll get a code chunk called setup, so I would just use this. I would use this code chunk to put any library commands for packages that you want to use. So say we want to use tidyverse, we would have to type library tidyverse, and say we want to use here, type library here. And then remember, at the moment, this hasn't actually done anything. So to get this code to execute, we have to click on this green button. So now we've executed library tidyverse, we've executed library here. So we now have these packages available to us. Okay. The final thing that I'm going to cover in this tutorial is using the here package. Now, the here package, basically what it does is it returns the location of your project folder, sorry. So I'm going to move down to this code chunk within the here package. So you can write the here package, then put 2 dots, and then we want to use a function within that package called here. So you can see here we've got a list of 3 functions from the here package. So we want to use here. So here from the here package, and what I'm going to do is execute this. With the cursor on that line, I'm going to hit command return. If you're on a PC, I think you can hit control return. Now, what's this done? It's produced a string, and that string says volumes, local data, AndyF, OneDrive, University of Sussex, our projects, my first project. That is basically the file path to our project directory. So what the here function does is it grabs the location of our project directory, assuming we're using an RStudio project. So let's say we wanted to load some data from our data folder. The way that we've structured our project folder is we've got a folder called data that has a data file in, and we've got an RDocs folder that has our Markdown documents in. So if we wanted to access our data, one way of doing this would be to put something within this here function. So we could type data, and let's execute this function again. So again, on a Mac I'm going to do command and return, and on Windows I think it's control return. So now look at this file string, and you'll see it's the same as it was before, except it's got data added onto the end. So by putting something within the here function, it kind of just adds it to the end of the path. So by putting data in, it adds data to the string. Now what about if we want a particular file within the data folder? Well, after where we've written data, we can put a slash and then the name of the file. And if you remember from the previous tutorial, we only have one data file, which is called metallica.csv. So now the here function is going to grab our project folder, and the text we've put within the here function adds to that. So it then adds data slash Metallica CSV. So I'm going to execute that command again, have a look at how the string changes at the bottom. So what's happened now, we've got a big long string of where our project folder is, and it's added data and metallica.csv to the end. So why is this useful? Well, this is useful because it's a quick way to generate a file path to a file that we want. So if, for example, we wanted to read in this data file like we did in a previous tutorial, and you can see the code I used before underneath with the double dots. If you find the double dots confusing, an alternative way to do this is to empty out this, to copy that, and to place that within there instead. So now, rather than using the double dots, we're using the here function to generate the file path to the data file that we want. And if we run this bit of code, then that's grabbed our data file and shown it to us on the screen. Just to overview, we install packages into R to get them onto our system. We then load them if we want to use them in a particular Markdown document. And the here package is a useful package for generating file paths to files that we want. Okay, bye for now.